Have you ever had a moment where everything in your life finally seemed to be falling into place, and then, out of nowhere, you messed it all up? Maybe it was a fight you didn't need to start, a poor decision that didn't make sense, a mistake you could have easily avoided. It's like, right when you're about to win, your mind steps in and finds a way to ruin it. And the worst part? This always seems to happen right when you're closest to getting everything you've ever wanted. This isn't random. According to Gay Hendricks, author of The Big Leap, this kind of self-sabotage is neither bad luck nor weakness. It's a psychological phenomenon he calls the upper limit problem. It's like having a mental thermostat, something deep within you, that sets the maximum amount of success, love, and happiness you feel allowed to have. And when life starts going too well, that thermostat flips on and pulls you right back down to what feels normal. Even if that normal is stress, struggle, or pain, let that sink in. This internal thermostat was set long before you had any idea it existed. It was shaped by childhood beliefs, things you were taught directly or indirectly by parents, teachers, even society. Messages like, don't be too ambitious, don't get cocky, don't make others feel bad by doing too well. These ideas took root. Over time, they quietly built themselves into your emotional operating system. So now, when reality starts to get better than those beliefs say it should be, your subconscious panics. You start feeling guilt, fear, you sabotage. And here's where it gets spooky. This self-sabotage doesn't show up as obvious self-destruction. No, it's subtle, sneaky, smart. Maybe you get sick just before a major breakthrough, or start a pointless argument in a happy relationship, or make a series of decisions that make no sense logically but emotionally. They pull you right back to where you belong. Hendricks explains, this can happen to anyone, even the most successful people. In fact, the more you grow, the more likely it is you'll run up against this invisible ceiling. And unless you recognize it and break through it, you'll be stuck in a loop. Brief success, sudden collapse, repeat. So, in this video, we're diving deep. This is a full exploration of the upper limit problem. Based on Hendricks' work, we're going to unpack why we sabotage ourselves, especially when we're winning, and how you can spot this pattern in your own life. And most importantly, how to break it. Because as Hendricks warns, it's not enough to dream big. You have to be able to hold on to your success once it arrives. And to do that, you've got to face the beliefs hiding at your core. Let's start with this quote from Hendricks. Each of us has an inner thermostat setting that determines how much love, success, and creativity we allow ourselves to enjoy. At first glance, that sounds pretty straightforward. But here's the twist. That thermostat isn't conscious. You don't know what it's set to. It's built from emotional scars, limiting beliefs, and early programming about what's safe. And it's always on. That's what Hendricks calls the upper limit problem, the idea that each person has a ceiling for how good life is allowed to get. When you hit that ceiling, whether through falling in love, landing your dream job, or just having a great week, your subconscious sees that as a threat. It panics. And then, it works overtime to restore the balance. But here's the kicker. That balance isn't actually healthy. It's just familiar. Hendricks puts it like this. When we hit our upper limit, we do something that stops our positive forward trajectory. It's not the outside world pulling us back. It's us. On a deep, automatic level, we create problems that bring us down. We pick fights. We procrastinate. We get busy with the wrong things. We even get physically ill. All just to go back to what feels emotionally safe. This is why so many people struggle with consistent success. You might have the talent, the drive, the right circumstances, but if your inner thermostat says, this is too much, your own mind will find a way to hit the brakes. And it starts early. If you were punished for showing off, or rewarded for playing small, or made to feel bad for wanting too much, that becomes your emotional baseline. If your joy made others uncomfortable, your brain learned, being happy is risky. And now, as an adult, you still live by those invisible rules. Hendricks writes, our upper limit thermostat setting holds us back from enjoying all the love, financial abundance, and creativity that's rightfully ours. You can earn money but feel guilty spending it. You can find love but sabotage it with doubt or drama. You can get opportunities but freeze instead of taking them. It's not a mindset problem, it's a capacity problem. You've never been taught how to hold that much joy, that much peace, that much abundance. And why is it so hard to spot? Because it disguises itself. Sabotage doesn't look like sabotage. It looks like stress, like just being realistic, like timing issues or bad luck. But underneath it it's that same mechanism, quietly making sure you don't outgrow the identity your inner child created to stay safe. But here's the beautiful part. If it was learned, it can be unlearned. The first step is learning to see the pattern. Recognize the ways self-sabotage shows up in your life. Catch the cycle before it completes, because once it's visible, you can start rewriting the script. In the next part, we're going to look at exactly how that sabotage hides in your life, in your relationships, your health, your habits, your victories. You'll learn the signs and how to interrupt the loop before it derails you. So if this is resonating, hit subscribe. You're going to want to follow along as we get deeper into this. Let's be honest. When was the last time someone taught you how to handle happiness? Think about that. We all grow up with these vague instructions about how to work hard, be humble, and avoid causing trouble. But what about receiving? What about holding on to love, to peace, to abundance without guilt or sabotage? The truth is, you weren't broken. You were trained to reject goodness. From the moment we're born, we start absorbing rules, spoken and unspoken. We learn that good things are conditional, that love has to be earned, that success must come at a cost, that joy always has a shadow. And so, even as adults, we carry those rules with us. We tell ourselves, I don't deserve this. This won't last. They'll find out I'm not good enough. I'm too much. And we think that's humility, that it's mature to doubt ourselves. But it's not. It's programming. Handed down by people who were also too scared to embrace joy. Passed on by generations who believed that suffering was noble and wanting more was selfish. But the most dangerous lie of all? If life feels good, something bad must be coming. That one sits deep. Because it convinces you that peace is a setup, that love is a trap, that the moment you relax, the universe will punish you for letting your guard down, so you stay in a constant state of tension. You live in a world where the better things get, the more anxious you feel, and you call that normal. But here's the thing, it's not normal, it's just familiar. And familiarity is the most seductive prison of all. Gay Hendricks calls this the zone of excellence trap. You become so good at managing, surviving, fixing, and controlling that you never step into your zone of genius, the part of you that's meant to live freely, abundantly, and with ease. Why? Because deep down, that genius version of you scares you. That version of you doesn't fit inside the identity you've spent your whole life building. That version of you doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't apologize for joy, doesn't ask for permission to rise. And for a lot of people, that's terrifying. So instead of moving into greatness, you stall, you cling to safety, you shrink, you find distractions, you settle for less. Because less is comfortable, less keeps the peace, less doesn't trigger others. But here's the hard truth. If you shrink to keep others comfortable, you'll suffocate your own soul. You were never meant to live inside the walls other people built for their own fears. You were meant to break them, to question them, to rise above them. But to do that, you need to confront the lie. The lie that says joy must be paid for, that love must be earned, that peace is only real if it's temporary. You need to unlearn the false belief that success will make you arrogant, that receiving will make you selfish, that asking for more is a betrayal of the people who have less. Because here's what they don't tell you. When you step into your fullness, everyone around you gets permission to do the same. There's nothing noble about dimming your light. There's nothing brave about staying small. And there's definitely nothing healthy about sabotaging your blessings just to match the expectations of people who never learned to dream bigger. So ask yourself, what rules are you still following that were never yours to begin with? Who told you you had to suffer? Who convinced you that ease was dangerous? And why do you still believe them? In the next part, we're going to look at the emotional economics of self-sabotage, how guilt, fear, and unworthiness become emotional currencies that keep you in survival mode, and why learning to receive without tension is one of the most radical things you can do, because you were never meant to be broken. You were just trained to believe you were. Let's talk about trade. Not trade like money for goods, but something far more invisible. The emotional trades you've been making your entire life without even realizing it. You see, when you're taught to doubt your worth, you start to exchange your true self for things that feel safer. You give up freedom in exchange for approval. You give up your voice in exchange for peace. You give up joy in exchange for predictability. And every time you make that exchange, it feels like a tiny betrayal. But you do it anyway, because that's what survival taught you. Somewhere along the way, you learn that being accepted is safer than being whole. That it's better to be liked than to be real. That it's easier to be quiet than to risk being misunderstood. So you become an expert in the art of self-editing. You say what you're supposed to say. You do what's expected. You smile on cue. And it works. People like you. They praise you. They tell you you're so reliable, so steady, so easy to be around. But deep down, something starts to ache. Because every time you trade your authenticity for approval, you lose a little more of your own reflection. This is emotional economics. It's the hidden system that governs so much of our lives. And the currency? It's your energy, your integrity, your aliveness. And the cost? It's the slow erosion of your soul. It's the reason you feel exhausted, even after resting. It's why connection feels empty. It's why, no matter how hard you try, life feels like it's happening at a distance. Because when you're stuck in survival mode, your nervous system is always asking, is this safe? Will this upset them? Should I make myself smaller to fit in? And the answer is almost always, yes, make yourself small. Make yourself invisible. Be agreeable. Be predictable. Be less. But here's the dangerous part. You get rewarded for it. People give you approval. Employers call you dependable. Partners call you low maintenance. Friends call you the calm one. And for a while, that feels good. But eventually, you realize something. You're not calm. You're disconnected. You're not low maintenance. You're neglected. You're not easygoing. You're erased. And when that realization hits, it hits hard. Because you see how much of your life has been built on emotional trades you didn't even consciously agree to. And that's when the grief sets in. Not just grief for the love you didn't receive, but grief for the version of you who never got to live. The one who wasn't afraid to take up space. The one who didn't apologize for existing. The one who asked for what he needed without guilt, without shame. That version of you is still in there. He's waiting, watching, hoping you'll stop trading pieces of yourself for crumbs of approval. He knows that safety without authenticity is a cage. That being agreeable without boundaries is spiritual suicide. That peace that costs your selfhood isn't peace, it's quiet self-destruction. So ask yourself, what emotional trades are you still making? And are they really worth the cost? In the next part, we'll talk about what happens when you stop trading and start reclaiming. We'll dive into the collapse note, the dramatic kind, but the quiet implosion that happens when you finally realize this version of life is no longer sustainable. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to remember who you were before the world told you to shrink. And that memory can become your rebellion. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no explosion, no dramatic meltdown. The collapse of the nice guy is slow, quiet, internal. It begins when the smiles start to feel heavy, when the no problem starts to feel like a lie, when the agreements you used to make automatically now leave a bitter aftertaste. You catch yourself mid-sentence, nodding along, and something inside whispers, "This isn't me." And for the first time in a long time, you listen. The nice guy doesn't fall apart in front of everyone. He implodes in silence. It's not a crisis. It's a realization. You realize that being liked isn't the same as being valued. You realize that being easy to be around isn't the same as being seen. You realize that all this effort to make others comfortable has left you deeply, endlessly tired. Not physically, spiritually. This is the part no one tells you about. They don't tell you that being the good guy, the safe man, the always there when you need him type, eventually makes you invisible. You become a utility, a comfort zone. People come to you for stability, not depth, for convenience, not connection. And you accept it because you were trained to. You thought that being good meant being available, that being strong meant never needing help, that being respected meant never making waves. But you were wrong, because here's the brutal truth. You don't get respect for being easy. You get used. They love the version of you that bends, that agrees, that gives. But the moment you hesitate, the moment you say, actually, I need, the warmth vanishes. That's when it hits you. They weren't loving you. They were loving the version of you that required nothing. And so the collapse continues. You stop laughing as much. You withdraw from shallow conversations. You stare at your reflection and think, when did I start disappearing? This isn't depression. It's clarity. It's the moment you stop confusing compliance with love. It's the moment you stop mistaking passivity for peace. And in that space, something old stirs. Something wild. Something forgotten. Not anger, though, that may come. Not revenge, though the idea might tempt you. No. What rises is truth. The truth that you've been living like a ghost in your own life. That every yes you said while biting your tongue, every smile you faked to keep the peace, every time you said, it's fine, when it wasn't. Those weren't small sacrifices. They were funeral songs for the man you were meant to become. But here's the beautiful thing about collapse. It clears space. It wipes the table. It rattles the cage. It creates a silence so loud, you can finally hear your real voice again. And that voice doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need to be rescued. It just says clearly, enough. In the next part, we'll talk about what rises from that collapse. About the rebellion that happens quietly, not with fists, but with silence. Not with arguments, but with boundaries. Not with rage, but with presence. Because once the nice guy dies, the real man begins to speak. And he doesn't explain himself. He simply becomes undeniable. This is the turning point. Not the dramatic kind with shouting or burning bridges. This rebellion happens in silence. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask permission. It begins quietly. The moment you no longer explain your boundaries, the moment you stop softening your tone to make others feel less uncomfortable with your truth, the moment you hear someone ask you to do something and instead of saying yes out of habit, you pause and simply say, number. That's where the revolution starts. It's not about becoming louder. It's about becoming clearer. The nice guy collapsed, and in the ashes, something ancient begins to rise. Not a version of you that wants to fight the world, but a version of you that's done negotiating your self-worth. You begin to withdraw your energy from things that don't nourish you. You stop texting first. You stop over-explaining. You stop showing up in places where your presence is expected but never valued. You reclaim your attention like it's sacred currency because now it is. People start to notice. Not because you made a scene, but because they feel the absence of something they used to feed off of. Your compliance, your attention, your predictability. And when you no longer hand those things out for free, they panic. They ask, what's wrong? But nothing's wrong. In fact, everything is finally starting to make sense. You see yourself again. Not the mask. Not the mirror image you crafted for others. You, the man who doesn't chase. The man who doesn't explain. The man who doesn't need approval to feel solid in his skin. You become deliberate. In your speech. In your silence. In the spaces you enter and the people you let close. And that shift, this inner rebellion, terrifies the people who once controlled you with praise, guilt, or silence. They call you cold. They say, you've changed. They try to pull you back with memories, manipulation, even affection. But it doesn't work anymore. Because now, you know the truth. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the absence of self-abandonment. And you're no longer abandoning yourself to keep the room calm. This rebellion doesn't come from rage, it comes from self-respect. It's when you start treating your energy like gold. It's when your time becomes precious, and your presence becomes a choice, not a default setting. You stop bleeding for people who wouldn't offer you a band-aid. You stop being the emotional mule carrying everyone else's burdens. You stop letting being nice be the excuse they use to keep you small. And it's not cruel. It's not selfish. It's not arrogant. It's alignment. Alignment with the man you were meant to be, before the world told you to be convenient. And the most powerful part? You don't need to tell anyone. You don't post a status. You don't make a speech. You don't need a dramatic send-off. You just become. You walk differently. You look people in the eyes. You stop flinching when someone disapproves. Because now, your approval of yourself is enough. This is the quiet uprising of the man who stopped begging to be seen and started seeing himself. The man who no longer needs permission. The man who no longer needs applause. The man who just walks forward even if he walks alone. And here's what no one tells you. Silence speaks louder than submission ever could. In the next part, we'll explore what that silence truly is. Not a weapon, not a wall, but a discipline, a form of love you finally give yourself. A stillness that no longer fears disconnection, because for the first time, you've reconnected with you. Let's clear something up. Being cold is not the same as being cruel, and detachment is not the absence of love. It's the presence of boundaries, because for too long, you believed that to love someone truly meant to be available to them at all times. To be open, to care, to say yes, to soften, to stay. But what if I told you, you don't stop caring, you just stop leaking? Because caring without boundaries is like pouring water into a cracked glass. It disappears, it drains you, it leaves nothing behind. That's what emotional detachment is. Not apathy, not indifference. It's conservation. It's waking up one day and saying, I'm done letting every emotion that isn't mine live in my body. You detach not because you stopped feeling, but because you finally realized your feelings are yours. They are not the property of anyone else, and you don't owe them on-demand access. You've probably heard this before. If you don't respond, you don't care. If you don't explain, you're being distant. If you don't react, you're being cold. But here's the truth. Stillness is strength. Non-reaction is clarity. And detachment is love for yourself. Because when every situation used to pull you in, when every argument used to hook you, when every tear used to turn you into a savior, you weren't being kind. You were being drained. You were letting guilt disguise itself as compassion. But now, something shifts. Now, you breathe before you speak. Now, you pose before you fix. Now, you choose distance not to punish, but to protect peace. Not just your own, but the kind of peace that actually helps others grow. Because when you stop feeding people's chaos with your constant presence, they're forced to sit with their own reflection. That's not cruelty. That's accountability. You used to chase clarity. Now, you become it. You used to explain your silence. Now, your silence is the explanation. They'll say you're cold. Let them. Because they're used to you melting. They're used to you folding at the first sign of tension. They're used to your warmth being a given. But now, it's not. Now, your energy is earned. Now, your love is intentional. Now, your presence is not an obligation. It's a decision. This is what discipline looks like. Emotional discipline is when you stop letting everything touch you. It's when you stop putting your hand on every burning stove just to prove you're not afraid of pain. You've been burned enough. Now, you let people feel your distance, not because you're punishing them, but because for the first time, you're healing yourself. You're rebuilding, reinforcing, reclaiming. And this version of you, the one who can love and still leave, the one who can feel and still choose peace, the one who doesn't flinch when accused of being too distant, he's not broken. He's just free. In the next part, we'll talk about the ripple effects of this new energy. What happens when you stop being so easy to reach and start being impossible to replace? At first, they don't notice. Your absence doesn't ring alarms. They think you're just tired, just busy, just going through something. But as the days stretch out, as your energy doesn't come back, as your name no longer lights up their phone, something changes. They feel it. And not just your silence, but the certainty behind it. You've changed the rules. Not loudly, not dramatically, just by no longer being available. And suddenly, the people who used to take you for granted start wondering, where did you go? Why aren't you reacting? Why does your stillness feel so loud? They call it distance. But what it really is dignity. Because now, you're no longer dancing to music you didn't choose. No longer responding to guilt, manipulation, or the fear of being misunderstood. You've become an echo, a presence that lingers even in your absence. And the haunting part? Your absence hurts them more than your presence ever moved them. Because it's easy to dismiss the man who's always there. It's easy to devalue the one who keeps proving himself. It's easy to control the person who needs to be accepted. But it's terrifying to lose the one who no longer needs you. That's when the masks fall. Suddenly, the ones who never made time are reaching out. The ones who dismissed your voice are now trying to hear you. But you're not chasing that anymore. Because you've seen it for what it is. Attention is not affection. Guilt is not love. And access is not entitlement. You're no longer feeding empty interactions just to feel relevant. You're no longer staying in rooms where you're merely tolerated. And now that you've stopped offering yourself on a silver platter, they have to face the uncomfortable truth. You were the one giving life to the relationship, to the friendship, to the dynamic. They just coasted on your effort, until your effort stopped. Now, your silence reflects their behavior louder than any argument could. Now, your absence becomes their mirror, and what they see terrifies them. They see their own manipulation, their own neglect, their own pattern of using softness as a tool of control. But you're not angry. You're just done. Because the greatest power you've gained isn't revenge. It's indifference. Not cold, not bitter, just unbothered. You don't respond to chaos. You don't explain your peace. You don't offer closure to those who had countless chances to choose you right and didn't. This is what happens when a man reclaims his value. He becomes a mystery again. Not because he's hiding, but because he's no longer performing. And that mystery, it echoes. Through the silence. Through your absence. Through every space that used to drain you. That's the echo effect. They feel it now, but you no longer need them to. Because you've already chosen your direction. And in the final part, we'll meet that man, the one who no longer asks, no longer chases, and no longer explains. The man who simply is. You don't chase anymore. Not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. You've seen how many of your choices weren't truly yours. They were patterns. They were survival. They were echoes of an old boy, still trying to prove he was worthy of being loved. But that boy, he's no longer running the show. Now, you sit still. Now, you speak less. Now, you move from a place that's quiet but immovable. Because when you stop chasing, you start attracting. When you stop explaining, you start radiating. The truly powerful man is the one who no longer needs to explain his silence. He doesn't argue to be understood. He doesn't beg to be seen. He doesn't perform to be wanted. He's carved himself out of pain, not polished by praise. And that makes him untouchable. He walks into a room and says nothing. Yet everyone feels something. Because he holds the rarest energy left in this world. Self-possession. He doesn't need to please because he's not afraid of rejection. He doesn't fear being alone because he's met himself in silence. He doesn't seek validation because he knows truth doesn't need applause. This man is not loud. He's not aggressive. He's not trying to dominate. But he's unshakable. And when others try to test him, they find nothing to grip. No triggers. No leaks. Nor desperation. He has nothing to prove. He simply is. This is the man who once thought he was broken because he felt too much. Too deeply. Too often. But he wasn't broken. He was just buried under years of false roles, false peace, and false love. Now, he doesn't wear masks. He doesn't offer himself as a solution. He doesn't water himself down so others can feel tall. He walks with silence and lets it do the talking. This is not a lonely man. This is a free man. And if you've made it this far, if you felt something awaken inside you while listening, then maybe, just maybe, you're not broken either. You're just remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. So stop chasing, stop explaining, stop folding, and start being. Because the real you, he was never missing. He was just waiting for your silence to set him free.